All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone, to the first session of the 2025 Research Method Division, KARMA, Doctoral Consortium, and Junior Faculty Consortium. It's my great pleasure as the formal chair of the consortium and co-organizer, together with the awesome Cindy Maupin, to welcome you to what will be 4 weeks of hopefully informative and instructive interaction and presentations. Our agenda for today is going to be quite simple, but first we need to get through some very important introduction to the people who make this consortium possible in the first place. In the background, let me tip my hat to Rebecca, who is running the show on the webinar. And I'm going to pass it on for a few minutes introduction. I don't know if you have slides, Larry, but otherwise just go ahead and talk over me. Larry Williams is the director and founder of KARMA, as well as a great leader in our field of research methods. Larry, over to you.
Say greetings, maybe good morning. I guess it depends upon where you're joining us from. Welcome to this great event. KARMA has been involved with this event from the beginning. It provides a very important role for the Research Methods Division in terms of an event that it would be difficult to implement in person at the Academy. So we do it online and move it up a little bit, and it's a great vehicle for building relationships between participants and the division. And so congrats to Javier and Cindy for all their success. Express my appreciation to the panelists that are with us today, as well as others that will be joining us. And I don't want to take too much time, so what I will do will just be to make sure that you know that KARMA is an academic center. We are a nonprofit academic center at Texas Tech, the Rawls College of Business. We were founded in '97, and we've been doing a variety of things since then. So I will invite you to visit our KARMA website, where you can learn about our main events. Those include short courses that we, in fact, are in our first week of. We're doing 22 live online short courses. We have sessions next week and the week after, so it's not too late to join. If you were so inclined, visit the website. You can learn about that. And we also have our institutional membership program that is registration is open for next year. So we don't require participants in this event to come from institutional membership schools. You may not know about our institutional membership, but if your school joins, you get a variety of types of benefits that are all described on the website. And I always like to try to remember to take advantage of any opportunity to thank Rebecca for all the great work that she does, this event, and everything else. So with that, I'll say good luck. I'm looking forward to staying involved with you all, and have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you, Larry. And Jason is our representative of the division. Although our division chair, Betty Zhu, couldn't be with us today, Jason will be a more than able stand-in, since he's the chair-elect and future chair of our division. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, hello everyone. So on behalf of the Research Methods Division's leadership team, I would like to welcome you to this consortium. And first of all, I would like to thank Javier and Cindy for putting together the great lineup. And of course, as usual, I would like to thank Larry and KARMA for the amazing support for our activities. And thank you for all the panelists for joining us. So I'll be real quick. For many years, Research Methods Division has offered wonderful learning opportunities on both quantitative and qualitative methods for both micro and macro research. So if you are coming to Academy of Management meeting in Copenhagen, please visit our professional development workshops and to continue the learning. And most importantly, please stay engaged with the division So be on the lookout for announcements from Research Method Division, from Academy of Management community. And of course, if you can join us at the reception for this consortium and the social hour for the whole division. So good luck with the learning and please stay engaged.
Thank you, Jason. And regarding that last social event that Jason just mentioned, you will be, as participants, you will be receiving information about that in one of our forthcoming messages. But again, that's one of the things that Karma enables together with the volunteers of the division. So thank you, Jason. Thank you, Larry, for bringing us there. Let's talk briefly about you, our participants. 202 people were admitted to the consortium. Not everybody got to get in, indeed. Although this is not quite our largest number of participants, I believe we have the largest number of participant countries based simply on where your institutions are respectively based. So just to mention a few, hello Abu Dhabi, hello Ghana, hello Curacao. We have participants from the northern end of Finland all the way to the southern island of New Zealand. It's 7 a.m. if you're joining us from Vancouver or Los Angeles, and you may feel like it's a bit early, but I'll sympathize equally with the people who are joining us all the way from literally for whom it's early morning in the other direction. Our participants cover 19 time zones. And so hello to those who are joining us from Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and Korea, and so forth. Most of you are already members of the division, and for that we are thankful. We'll be equally and perhaps even more thankful for those of you who you know who you are, who are not yet members of the division, and if you want to continue availing yourself of all the activities that the division offers, as Jason mentions them, please remember that this is your opportunity the next time you register for the Academy of Management or you renew your membership is your chance to add the division without necessarily distracting from any other divisions you're part of. Our schedule is one that you've received multiple times, so I won't belabor it, other than to say, be mindful of the fact that today we're meeting for 90 minutes. We'll again be meeting for 90 minutes in our last session, which is also in webinar format on June 25th. But next session on June 11th and the session after that on June 18th, you're invited to stay an extra half hour afterwards for what we might call a social, but really a network forming series of events that will allow you to meet your fellow participants in ways that our current format today does not necessarily allow. With this, I'm going to pass it on to Cindy while I show the list of participants and panelists for our first session. And Cindy, the floor is yours from now on.
All right, thank you, Javier, and welcome everyone. Today we're very excited to have our panelists joining us. First, we have Semin Park. Dr. Semin Park is an assistant professor in the Management and Organization Department for the Smeal College of Business at Penn State University. She's an expert on relational dynamics, both within and between teams, and her work has been published in management outlets, including AMJ and ORM, among others. She has also published with and about a variety of quantitative methods, and she has successfully published several top-tier works stemming from her dissertation research, which we think is pretty cool. She's also produced an impressive pipeline of research, both that are methods-related and content-related using advanced methods. So that is a lot of what she's bringing today, but I'm sure she will also have lots more to tell you about herself and about her experiences, and she will be our first speaker. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our other two speakers as well, so you know who's coming, but then we'll proceed in this order, starting with Semin, going to Valentina, and then ending with Dawn. So next, our panelist, Valentina Mele. She is an associate professor of social and political sciences at Bocconi University. She's an expert on public administration and innovation in government, and her research has been published both in top-tier public administration journals and in top-tier management journals, including AMJ. She's published extensively with and about qualitative methods, and in recent years, she's also been publishing and using methods that are mixed method in approach. So she's both quantitative and qualitative savvy. Dr. Melly also has extensive experience in both reviewing and editorial roles, and she's also contributed to workshops focused on publishing qualitative research. And then last but not least, Dr. Don Berg is the Louis D. Beaumont Chair of Business Administration at the University of Denver. He's an expert in corporate strategy and a prolific researcher. And in fact, he's been recognized as one of Stanford's top 2% scientists based on his impressive publication record. He's also published with a variety of quantitative methods and also published about a variety of methods in management. And he has editorial experience, including roles as an AE at both AMJ and ORM, and he's also been the guest editor of 4 special issues with ORM. And so he has extensive experience also assessing dissertations and method-oriented papers, both for conferences and awards. So we're very excited to have these 3 joining us today. As you can see, you're going to get a variety of perspectives. You've got your micro-quantitative, your qualitative, and then your macro-quantitative represented. So hopefully there's something for everybody in who we've got today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over and allow Semin to start her presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Semin Park. I'm, as introduced, assistant professor at Penn State. Let me start sharing my screen. So, as Cindy mentioned, I was fortunate enough to be part of like really big multi-year research project, and my dissertation was actually a part of it. And as I was preparing this slide, I contemplated whether I should only talk about my own research experience from beginning to the end, or should I just go a little step back and see a big picture and then walk you through some of the key learning that I had to learn in a hard way. So I decided to go latter way that I kind of show you a big picture, and then I will sprinkle through a little bit of my own experience. All right, so I'm Korean. In Korea, we have a saying that's called 용두사미, which means it's dragon head with snail tail. So what that means is we all want our dissertation or big project to be this bold, big, ambitious, insightful idea, but too often we end up having snake's tail at the end, right? That comes with messy data, some bumps in the road, not some, many bumps in the road, and misaligned constructs, and you name it, right? So I call this as dragon problem that we all embrace as a researcher, but more so in your dissertation or big project. So I want my talk to be how to keep our dragon to be dragon all the way at the end. So I want to talk about 3 things to taming our dragon. So first, we have to align the triangle, which I will talk about in shortly. We have to manage people and the process. And also, we have to be bold in expanding our methods. And this suits because we are in RM division. So here we go, part 1. As a researcher, we have told many times you have to align your phenomena with theory and the method. But I really want to emphasize that we really have to start with what you care about. Because many times the dragon head becomes snail when you lose the momentum and motivation itself. It is really hard job enough to keep this research going and alive. And if you don't have the phenomena that you really care about, it's really hard to keep up. And then we have to think about the theory that you can fit. Oh, sorry. Am I going ahead? Yeah, sorry. Okay. You have to fit the theory to actual puzzle. So what is the theoretical kind of audience and the home that you are contributing this research to? And then most importantly, in my mind, you have to think about the method that matches the level and the process, right? So how we can think about your method really can capture the phenomena that you care about. And then this is linked to my third point when I talk about expand the horizon, because oftentimes we tend to divert back to our old way or more conventional way, so to say, of doing research. But that results in many times losing this level and capturing the phenomena in the right way. And then that becomes a disjoint. And that's usually, in my experience, the reason you lose this momentum and motivation. So I really want to emphasize that. And more so, you have to think about way that you have to be ready to realign. What I mean by that is in my experience, yes, I start with this like bold idea and phenomena that I care about, which is conflict dynamics, and especially how individuals are navigating those experiences throughout the team processes. And when I was thinking about it, I was kind of probably in my comfort zone where, you know, maybe there's some set of conflict experience that is kind of like, you know, stayed in the person, and maybe that's the thing that matters the most for them. And then as I was digging into, as I was collecting data in the field, I soon realized that that was not the case. In the moment of conflict experience, in the moment of their expressing and receiving conflict, really did matter for people's performance at the time. That really made me to go back to my understanding of the phenomena and then go reiterate the theory and so on. So you have to be also ready to realign that triangle. The second thing is I call this people and process to be your research infrastructure. So starting with people, maybe a lot of things that you heard about. You have to manage your chair and committee. You have to manage the co-authors if you're in the big project together that result in multi-papers. And also there are things like RAs if you're in the lab environment, or field data, you have to manage the managers in the organization and so on. And all of this, it's, you know, it's really hard to admit, but as a management scholar, I was really bad at managing people. And then like as experiencing it, it is actually really the key point that any project, small or big, it's all about how to manage all those people around you, because they're there to support your chairing committee, and you have to be mindful whose role is playing into supporting you. So this person that you're relying on this content theory? Is this person you're relying on in terms of specific method? Maybe be cognizant about what you're asking to them so that they can help you better. And that goes to RAs as well. In my dissertation and big project experience, I had to code gazillion amount of video data, and I had to use 13 research assistants who was in undergrad level. And at first, I was treating them as just, you know, someone who's doing grunt work. But soon I realized that I really have to motivate them to do this work and make sure that they see what they're doing really means something. So I actually turned this into a small kind of workshop for them. So when they come back to me with the weekly work, I show them, of course, not about that content because that's gonna like contaminate the data, but in some other context in doing this, so how does it turn into actual knowledge creation? And then show them different skill set that is not necessarily really related to this project, but that can hone their skin beyond this, that really sparked them. And I'm very proud that two of them went ahead and become a PhD students, and one of them actually graduated, and now he's gonna become a professor in our field. So that relationship is really meaningful, and then that is the infrastructure that you're building in any kind of big project and dissertation even. And then, of course, the process management is important, starting from IRB and all the way. And two things that I want to emphasize here is there is something called 2.5 rule, which I was taught by my advisor. Everything that you think takes X amount of time actually takes 2.5 times. So that means that you have to think about the buffer time. You have to create the system that minimize that to happen. So one thing, if you are really handling massive data, make sure the data has to be controlled in different version. What those version means, document it, because that's going to help other people in that project, but also yourself. In 3 months later, when you open this folder, you will probably have no idea what you have been doing. So that's really important. And the last thing I really want to emphasize to this RM division member is we are actually in a prime time to expand the horizon. I'm a true believer that all the things that we are seeing in the field, very complex, but that's an opportunity, because it is opportunity that we are also backed up by a lot of technology and analysis advancement that allows us to tap into those data. So there's so many things that you can do, right? So if you start from like conventional way, maybe there can be some limited set of questions that you can answer. However, if you kind of flip the thinking that, okay, this is a phenomenon I really want to capture in this way, what's going to be the best method that, you know, maybe it's something that I don't know, but maybe I should know about. So along the process, I hone in multiple different skills. And these are the set of things that we are probably talking about like the next and third week of this. But, you know, like even diary study, I feel like using, you know, phone app, if we can develop something a little bit gamification, it's gonna probably increase a lot of response rate, making sure that people are engaged, right? And also there's tons of data out there, like digitally traceable. A lot of companies are using something like Slack to, you know, really see the interaction of people that you can capture all those dynamics within. Also, there are sensor data. I was fortunate enough to be involved in this unobtrusive measurement development grant, which means that I got to play with sociometric badge, which was key to my dissertation when I tap into who was in the proximal distance when someone was bursting out this conflict, who was affected by it. I was able to use those metrics data, the badge data, to infer who was impacted by, even though they were not directly targeted. You know, you're in the earshot. All those things are not possible with those things. So we have now machine learning, right, which will really enhance this text analysis. It's not just about word count, it's gonna be sentiment analysis and all the way beyond. So this is really prime time to use those methods. And also, of course, I'm big on social network methods because I always see the phenomenon as interactions and how that evolution of interaction comes to lives in the teams. So there's so many things that you can do with that, even if you're not a team researcher. And last but not least, agent-based modeling or simulation allows you to expand the data beyond how you collect it. So you, for example, you are only able to collect 3 months of data, but what if the reviewer 2 comes back to you and say, oh, like, is it gonna be true if it's like working another year together? You can simulate that using the 3 months of data, but go beyond those time scope that you are confined to. So all this to say is I really hope that this talk really motivate you to bring your dragon to life and fly all the way at the end. And I'd love to connect with you if you can find me through my website. There are all the information out there too. So thank you for listening, and I will wrap up here.
Thank you very much, Semin. That was a wonderful presentation. I think it'll give our participants quite a lot to think about, which is great. Next, we're going to have Dr. Valentina Mele. So we'll let you go ahead and share when you're ready.
Okay, excellent. Can you see it? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. And I'm really delighted to share my experience with you and flattered by this invitation. So what I've been asked to discuss today is sort of my journey and some lessons learned on conducting qualitative analysis. In a sense, one could argue that qualitative analysis is always a large project because although you might start not particularly ambitious, you often end up with a jumbo massive project. So I don't know many non-large qualitative projects that see the light through publications. And this is not meant to discourage you, quite the opposite. I found this my favorite methodology and research experience. And today, although I had some alternative experiences, this is really dear to me. So let me start by presenting, in a sense, what are some research questions that, in my view, and this is really evidence and insights that have been widely codified. So we'll be very happy also to share references should you deem it useful, or further examples if you want to contact me anytime. But let's say that the type of questions that we want to ask with the qualitative project are typically why and how. So normally you really want to gain the inner view of participants, their lived experience, right? How they interpret the phenomenon. So instead of being a minus or a limitation of the study, this gets to the central stage of your research project. Another perhaps very distinctive type of inquiry that suits qualitative projects is this idea that beyond, or in a sense behind the correlations, you can really understand the mechanisms, the undergirding mechanisms, or sometimes trajectories when temporal sequence is important. And also appreciate, again, contextual factors, not as something that you want to control for, but rather as something that you want to exploit and really engage with. Now, although sometimes, especially in the past, I would say that today, at least the management and public administration communities I'm more familiar with are quite agnostic. In the past, there used to be sort of stereotype that qualitative research was not good enough for theorizing, which is clearly a myth that we want to debunk vigorously. So no, qualitative research in and of itself, even when you have a large project that is exclusively qualitative, is good for theory building, is a specific type, obviously, of theory that, the analytical exercise is more often theory building, less so theory testing, although, just to be fair, one could argue that qualitative projects can also be used in a deductive way. When qualitative projects, for example, an exemplary case study is used in a deductive way, this is typically not the case with a large project or with your dissertation. Is more to make a point, is more to show and to make your theory perhaps more understandable to readers. So for this presentation, I will focus on the more inductive way of theorizing, starting from qualitative analysis, or abductive, the back and forth. And Semin really referred indeed to this idea of iteration, reiteration, and as I will mention also later, I think this is fundamental, and it is something that we find across methodologies indeed. Okay. So first of all, what does it mean to make a research project that is qualitative in nature, like transparent and understandable, intelligible, right? And by intelligibility, we mean the possibility not only of seeing something in a transparent way, so account in a transparent and fair way, but also really understand readers, which means the audience of your project, and clearly, hopefully, the readers of an article, of a monography, of a book, and reviewers in between, right? Between you and the readers, reviewers, the editor and reviewers, is really understanding which choice you made. So somehow accompany readers through your research journey. And typically when it's qualitative, I don't want to depict it as overly romantic, but it's true that it's a research journey. Also in terms of time that you often have to devote to go get the data. You have to become a go-getter. So this is typically, I think, well depicted as an experience of journey. So we can argue that this idea of making a project that is qualitative, intelligible, lies in between two classical approaches. One is, and I really invite you to think about it, one is the assumption and this attitude that some, especially qualitative scholars, have to assume that because it's an art, it's a craftsmanship, right? You don't need to account for it. So pretty much clearly this is a bit hyperbolic, but the idea is because it's an art, most of it is tacit. It lies on the talent of who you are, of being imaginative, creative. And so it can be hardly taught. And even less, it requires a detailed disclosure because this is more for quantitative guys, that one could argue. On the other hand, you have this other archetype that is the classical treatment of qualitative research of textbooks, not just qualitative, but certainly qualitative research, whereby there is this, it is very codified, is more of a box-ticking exercise. So it boils down to mechanical choices that, again, because they are like from a menu, you don't need to account for because you follow them. There is one best way. It's very Tayloristic approach, right? There is one best way. So if you follow it, you don't need to report it. So I really stress the importance of sharing with your readers the journey of a qualitative project, because instead this is fundamental for what? For the quality criteria. So quality criteria of qualitative research are different from quantitative research. There are functional equivalents, one could argue, so they pretty much serve the same analytical purposes, but they're technically different criteria. Trustworthiness, for example, and transferability, not generalizability, but transferability. Is it possible to transfer, having explained what is so specific about this empirical setting, and also where you fare to the inner voice of participants, of your respondents, of individuals or dynamics that you observed, okay, as an ethnographer, for example. Are you credible? Are you giving thick description? And is your narrative really showing and indicating that you are an expert and that you treated the corpus of evidence with respect, okay? Stopping where you saw contradictions without forcing your view on the explanation. And if this is the general theory, there are a few I think rules of the game that are more, things that you want to consider when designing a large project, but also, so it's data collection, data analysis, also when writing it, because so much is, the word that you use is so important, also writing matters, right? And this again is slightly different, not because you don't want to read a good quantitative piece, and if it's well written, you like it much better, but because sometimes data speaks for itself, while here clearly the data is the word that you use, how you use it. So also engaging in a dialogue with the presentation of Semin, being transparent about the multiple sources of data and thinking about which in a large project, you have the luxury of engaging, employing multiple sources, which can then lead to a purely qualitative analysis or obviously lend themselves to a more mixed methods. But thinking about which sources you can employ and accounting for access, how are you thinking? So first of all, don't underestimate how difficult it is. Well, obviously, I often explore as empirical context public organizations at any level. So public organizations are particularly tough to get into, but in general, how are you going to have access? And then you have to explain also in your account of the methodological choices, how did you gain access? How did you select your informal or the empirical context? Did you participate or did not participate? Until a few years ago, by default, everybody would tell you it's much better not to be a participant because obviously you detach yourself from the context, from the phenomenon, from the dynamics, and you're more objective. Today, especially with the rise of action research and participatory research, this is true only to some extent. So again, it's better to follow your passion. And if you think you would gain more access and more like fine-grained understanding through participation, as far as you are able to explain the reflexivity, right, and maintain some of it, that works as well. Data saturation, super important. What does it mean, data saturation? That you should stop when you think you know enough. And here it's clearly a very discretionary choice. Did you saturate or not? And this is part of, obviously, your own understanding of how well you believe that you can now nail down the research question and the phenomenon under analysis. But data saturation is very important to be signaled. And that analysis is something that is virtually missing and until a few years ago was really not considered. So transparency meant just explaining who did you interview, pretty much, which questions did you ask, while today that analysis across all social sciences is fundamental. So it's another piece of the journey, right? It's a stage of the journey that is often very long, especially if it's a dissertation. And so it's fundamental to also be transparent and share whether you use templates, a classical joyous style. So how did you move basically from your raw data to these very sophisticated interpretation that you're offering and you're writing about, these thick descriptions that you use to persuade the reader that you know enough and you're good enough at understanding the phenomenon. The other element is triangulation. And I think, again, Semin mentioned the importance also of triangulation, right? Using and being open also to what? To rival explanation in a fair way. Just engage in a fair conversation with the readers. Reflexivity is something that, again, is combined with the quality criteria that we discussed earlier. So you need to explain how did you get into this project and how are you living it. I have plenty of examples where I approach a project with an idea in mind that was also influenced by my own ideology and my own previous understanding. And then I left with a completely different understanding, with a completely different also opinion, very often remaining agnostic as opposed to judgmental about the phenomenon. Now, it is very important to consider when you have a large project and you interview, to get access, you often promise, and you have to, anonymity, especially if the topic is very sensitive. Now I have a few projects ongoing with vulnerable groups, another on the conflict of interest of international civil servants, or victims of police perpetrated crimes, the decision to opt out from the delivery of abortion. So these are all examples of my current or recent projects where I did promise, obviously, anonymity and confidentiality. This is not trivial when you write because there you're tempted to give more to the readers, and instead you always have to find the right balance between not just the mechanical anonymity, but more importantly, making sure that this individual who trusted you, they won't run any risk, which includes reputational risk. It's not always life or death, but it shouldn't, right? Because also we're talking about social sciences. Now I'm getting to the conclusion, and even more specifically on the topic of today, so large projects and dissertations. So again, very unlikely this will be a quick and dirty type of project, but again, it's going to be a journey punctuated by frustrations for sure, as it's often the case with ambitious, sometimes monumental data collection and data analysis efforts. You will end up with very large corpora of data, sometimes of different types, like interviews, observation, massive archivals. You triangulate them and back and forth, iterations. And this is perhaps the only way to really feel this sense of embeddedness and understanding. Now, this is what makes your writing credible and trustworthy, but at the same time, it is, sometimes producing too much richness. So what can you do about it? Now, because this is a dissertation or a large project, slicing is clearly acceptable. Slicing is tricky, we all know it, and qualitative is no exception to it, because you might end up with two lower quality project, sub-project, as opposed to a very ambitious one. So especially if it's an early career attempt, I would, my personal recommendation would be just start with a large project, try to think about your beloved paper or book out of it. And then once, you are halfway with this endeavor, especially if possible, using or working with co-authors, think about perhaps a second project. Clearly, if you have 3 publishable papers, that's not a great advice, but I'm speaking about large monography or a large project where you feel you have more to it. And, if you have signs such as colleagues with friendly reviews telling you it's more than one paper, at conferences, colleagues telling you, I see at least 2 stories in this paper. So maybe, if it barks like a dog, maybe it means you need to slice. And in this respect, it's fundamental to use authors also to avoid the risk. I'm talking about projects that insist on the same empirical corpus, okay? Not parallel projects where it's no-brainer to slice, but if it's the same empirical corpus, you ask the help of co-authors who could also see this evidence with a different perspective, with a new analytical lens, and can help you really making sure that you're not duplicating, which is clearly no good in the academia and in general. Cindy, just tell me if I have a couple of more minutes or not.
Yeah, maybe like 1 or 2 more minutes, then we should be okay.
Okay, excellent. So just to conclude, this is my last slide. When qualitative, especially if it's a dissertation and you want to signal perhaps a methodological versatility, or if it's a very large project, so there is a component where you want to ascertain, going back from the very first slide, the research question. If you want to ascertain through your research, but you also want to understand the why and how, maybe there is room for a mixed method where qualitative serves a purpose, typically in combination with quantitative methods. Remember, there is also the quali, but it's very unusual. The majority of mixed methods are sequential, quanti-quali, or quali-quanti, okay? And in this respect, the qualitative part can help you exploring the how and why of some inference. So you ascertain, but you also want to understand why. So we know that's the case, but why? Or you can find unexpected results, very disappointing results. That was my experience, for example. And instead of just changing your hypothesis, as we all did once in a lifetime, you be you are candid and you say, this is what I found, but I'm now trying to tackle the puzzle, right? Unpack the reasons why my hypotheses were flipped, for example. So you take this as an opportunity to rescue your findings. And very last, you can use it to operationalize a construct or an instrument like a survey. So you will use, in this case, quality. So as you see, qualitative, we have been discussing qualitative per se, but can be also qualitative and something else. Grazie.
Thank you so much, Valentina. That was very informative, and I love the way you were able to play off also some of what Simon talked about too. It's great to see that those same types of decisions across research are important both for quantitative and qualitative, or even mixed methods research. So thank you. Now we're going to switch over to Don whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Cindy. Let me first of all begin by thanking Larry and Jason for their service work and Karma and Research Methods Division, respectfully. It's a tremendous amount of time and commitment that you're giving for other people. You really need recognition for this, and I just want to give you both a big shout out for that. And more to this session, to Xavier and Cindy, thank you very much for the time and effort, energy you spent behind the scenes organizing this, managing it. All those breakout rooms and groups and assigning students and doing surveys, I'm sure took a tremendous amount of time. So thank you very much for what you're doing with that. I kind of feel like a variable entering a regression equation here. I hope that I can add something significant. I don't think I'm going to be able to, though. To what Simeon and Valentina had to say, I really like their points, and probably what I'll end up doing is kind of echoing and reinforcing them and talking about just some general principles. But I'm going to try to share some experience that I've had. My dissertation a long time ago, but I'll share some experiences more as a dissertation chair, as an editor, as a reviewer, and as an author. So I'm going to give a very different perspective on some of the same points we've heard. And my apologies for any redundancies that show up. I'm sure there will be many. Anyway, you see that okay? Okay, so designing a dissertation or large research project. So let me see if I can get going here. Oops, there we go. Sorry about that. So maybe again, in a lot of large sense, this is going to look somewhat like Samin's dragon problem. I'm going to take a little different view on that. So some quotes here. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Many of you may have seen this before with Alice in Wonderland, and I'm going to come to this point a little bit later. And a couple more quotes out of movies. Find a truly original idea. It is the only way I will ever distinguish myself, the only way I will ever matter. For any of you who have seen the movie From a Beautiful Mind, you know that refers to John Nash's interpretation of his thoughts of making something original and important. And in a more recent movie, one that just came out last year, where Bob Dylan says to Joan Baez, "Your lyrics are like an oil painting at the dentist's office." And she returns that nice statement with an expletive of her own. But anyway, I'll come back to these three a little bit later, but I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of what these quotes have to say for us. So obviously designing a dissertation or a large research project involves dozens and dozens of decisions. Most are interdependent, meaning they impact one another. So we need to pay careful attention to these interrelationships, as well as some of the facts that impact them. And I'm going to be talking about three general ideas and five rather more focused suggestions. So first of all, and some of this will be redundant, but I'm going to try to take it a little differently. You need to deeply immerse yourself in your research question and it's a little different, and the meaning of what you think your answer will be. Now, Valentina said it's absolutely correct. You start off with an idea and you think you know the answer, and your data teaches something different. I can't tell you how many times it's happened to me. My data are always smarter than I am, always. But nonetheless, to the degree that at the beginning that you can think about not just what the question is, but why the answer matters, it is important. You need to think this through. Why are you studying this question? Why does it matter to you? We heard Simi talk about this too, about caring about it. But I want just to encourage you to spend a great amount of time front end elaborating and thinking about this, thinking it, rethinking it, discussing, evaluating the question. What will your answer add? Discuss with different audiences. When I started my career off, I was at a very highly productive research school, so it means Penn State, and 4 or 5 of us would go for lunch every day, and we would talk about research. And sometimes we'd debate questions and what we thought the answers would be for an hour, hour and a half. And we'd do that day after day after day. And you'd think through the nuances of, is that answer really important for our literature? Is it for you personally? Discuss it with your partners, discuss it with your friends, discuss it with your neighbors, or if they'll listen to you, or that type of thing. But just think through the research question and the meaning of the answer. And why that's important. Why that's important is that helps establish the basis of your contribution. And that contribution is going to greatly impact where your paper or your thesis ends up meaning and advancing the overall conversations in your literature. So add to knowledge on the topic, add to knowledge on the theory, both. Why is important? And is it original? So it's similar ideas what we've heard before, but I hope a little bit differently in terms of thinking about the meaning of those questions. I'm also going to point out something different to you, too. And I go back to my days as a doctoral student and even writing papers when I first started off and so on. And I see this almost all the time as a reviewer, as an editor, and so on, is people will see gaps in the literature. But that's a different way to motivate a paper than find a problem to solve. And just because something hasn't been studied before or could be studied differently or some different variable could be added to an equation, it does not make for an interesting question or an interesting answer. And many papers, I'd say probably should say most papers, I should maybe even say almost all papers do not address this matter. So ask yourself, and I'm asking myself as a reviewer, as an editor, why in the world these people do this study? It's a little bitty question, not justified, not developed. Maybe it's a gap in the literature, and then there's 30 or 40 pages of text and tables and everything else to address this little bitty question that may not even really been well developed or thought about. So this is, I think, crucial up front. Why is this problem important for your literature? Does it address an assumption that the literature relies upon? Does it address a relationship that has a new boundary condition or an intervening variable? But this article here I have cited is of great value in helping you think through kind of the scope of your research question. I highly recommend looking at this as you're thinking through the question and the answer to that question. Now, this is a grid that I made when I first started editing. I was editing AMJ as associate editor, and I was processing 2, sometimes 3 papers a week. And I needed a quick way of trying to make sense of what the papers were doing and what I thought they could do. So I had here a 2x2. You know how we are as academics, we got to put everything into 2x2s. So with AMJ, if you look at the top 2 columns, theory new, theory nothing new. So I'd read the paper. Is there some new theoretical argument here, a new theoretical structure, new theoretical something? Or is the paper just applying existing theory? And then I'd look at the topic or the phenomenon. Is some aspect that hasn't yet been studied, or is it something that has been previously studied? And I'd put the paper into this box, then I'd read what the reviewers did. And then and almost all of them were theory nothing new, and then in that right-hand set of columns. And I'd look to see if we can push them over into that upper left. Can we direct them over to there within the current structure of their theory and their data, or can they get new data reasonably within all of this? So it was a way that I thought about the contribution, the answer to the research question. Can we direct it? Can we do it? So that's just one more thing to think about. And of course, I doubt if other editors and reviewers would use this type of thing as just, I did it as a framework to facilitate quick decision making, or quicker, I should say. But as you start thinking about your research question and the answer to your research question, are you adding to theory and are you adding new to your topic? And or alternatively, is your research question applying existing logic to a new topic? and so on, just different ways of classifying this. And in essence, there are different journals that serve each of these boxes. And that may help you think through, is your question important? Is it original for the literature? So it's just a way of adding some structure to thinking through your question. And this is something I found valuable. I published this as a book chapter in an editing book in 2008. And I think it just was, I did it, I was asked to do it because it was, the idea was helping structure answers. And I think it was helpful for some people. Question number two, suggestion number two. Your question should inform your design and measurement decisions. We saw this with Samin's triangle, and I think that this is a really important point too, and I completely agree. Align your research question with your design type and measurement approach. It really should help inform your decisions. Oftentimes, our focus is on analysis and analytical solutions, new ways of thinking about analysis, and so on. I see that frequently in RMD and Karma and so on. I want to redirect attention to the design, your design and your measurement scheme. Do they fit with the question? Do they capture the underlying mechanisms in the answer? And also, as you look at your design and as you look at your measurement scheme, what's original there? Where does your uniqueness come from? So, and how do they relate? Excuse me. How do they relate to your research question? So, I think Samin's triangle really helps capture this, but this may add by thinking through originality in each of those boxes. Okay. Suggestion number three, connecting the big and the small picture. This is something that I know I struggled with a lot, and particularly when I got started off, is I could get deeply mired in the forest there inside the trees. But we need to think about it both big and small picture. Big picture, how does each one of your decisions relate to your research question? How does it relate? And your contribution. So our research question really guides not just our decision making and our method and our design and measures, I should say, but also the different questions that we ask, and also the small picture. It's so easy to get mired in specific argumentation, methodological decisions, but we got to make sure these things are connected and continuously evaluate them. Now, that's easy to say. How do you do it? I'm sorry to be self-serving on this, but there are a couple publications that can help guide you here. This is one thing I try to do with the students I work with is this research design canvas. Dave Ketch and Brian Boyd and I wrote a book chapter in an edited volume that was this idea of basically a step-by-step process for doing a research project and looking at what each of your major decisions are going to be within each one of those steps and how they relate to the research question and contribution. More recently, you can see there was an AMJ tool or AMJ that came out for this as well. You probably saw this advertised. There was quite a bit made of it. And I'd recommend looking at that one too. Look at both of them. These are ways to codify and anticipate your decision making and really see how all the pieces fit together before you go too far and help organize your thinking. So back to this point here, these two frameworks will help connect your big and small picture decisions. Okay, finally, some focus decisions. Limit the scope of your models to being doable. I see so many students who come with a massive diagram with 15 different constructs in it, and I caution you against that. Very much so. Do what's doable. Focus on in depth over breadth. Do not try to copy the structure format of what others have done before you. Use it for inspiration, yes, but don't try to like structure paragraph by paragraph what you see some other paper having done. I remember when I got started off, I would read dissertations and I would look at the structure of them and think, well, maybe it's how I should organize mine. And all they did was waste time. And I recommend against that. You're smart enough and you work hard enough to do your own unique piece. Certainly look at what others have done, other dissertations as inspiration, but you do your own work. You can do it. Keep a notebook on your bedstand. That sounds strange, I know, but I know my best ideas usually occurred to me right when I was falling asleep. I thought, yeah, I'll remember it tomorrow. I never do. Larry, you mentioned about your memory. I meant mine's far worse. And the idea here is as you're relaxing, oh yeah, think about this variable, think about that one, because you get so deeply mired in this. It does not know hours of your day. It comes back in your head wherever. Also, be resourceful squared. Seek knowledge where you can get it. Obviously, go to Karma for deep methodological advice, as I have it written here, of course, but take additional classes, talk to additional people, search outside of your comfort zone for additional resources, expand your knowledge, expand your capabilities beyond where you go. Next to last, you'll have days where your progress is lost, you don't have motivation, your directions change, you're into drawbacks. Rejection is all part of this process too. It's highly emotional too. We question ourselves, we question our confidence, we question everything. We just do. However, learning and evolving is occurring during that time. And be organized and adaptive. One of my former colleagues, Don Hambrick, a giant in our field, used to say, persistence and thick skin is what he would advise students. And he's absolutely right about that. Others have said this is really about 5% intelligence and 95% work ethic. And I think there's a lot to be said about that too. And one last thought about a direction originality, those sites I gave you earlier. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, one of the most successful children's books of all time. Approximately 100 million copies sold, translated in 174 languages. John Nash won Nobel Prize in Economics, 94. Bob Dylan won the Nobel Prize in Literature, only songwriter to do so, one of the best-selling musicians of all times. I think maybe there's something to learn from those people. And anyway, just some thoughts for all of you, and I hope that was some help. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Great thoughts. And again, I think that helped round out a lot of what we were talking about in this session. So very, very helpful contributions. All right. And then Javier, do you have slides that you're putting up next or just straight into questions?
We'll go straight into questions if you
Okay.
want. This way, our speakers will be more visible on slide than if I keep a
Perfect.
slide up. So
All right.
I think we have about 20 some minutes left for questions.
Great.
For our audience's information, because we're in webinar format, it would not be practical, and given the very large number of participants, to let people unmute themselves. So we'll be using the questions that you contributed to us when you signed up for the for the session. And in this context, thanks to Truma, who helped us arrange those questions. But over to you, Cindy, to distill the best of the awesome questions we got from our audience.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to, pardon me, try to pick ones that have not already been answered, but maybe have been hinted at in some of your presentations. And this is one that can be answered by, any of the three of you, or if everyone sits there quietly, I'll call on somebody like the teacher in the room. So the first question, how do you narrow down the scope of a project and either define or refine your research question, especially when it's a large project or a dissertation? I know Don mentioned in particular that many times we end up with these giant ideas, but how do you take it down to something manageable?
For me, it was always about the theory. There's got to be a theoretical justification for the constructs in the model. And reviewers will ask, why these constructs and why not others? And if you don't have a good answer to that based upon theory, that makes it difficult. So part of a theory, integrating theories, I think that becomes crucial, whether they're the moderators, intervening variables, and that'd be my first one. Theory should drive it.
Wonderful. Go ahead, Simon.
I will add one more thing to it. So as a quantitative, like big data researcher, I also think if you can't really decide, let's say there are still multiples, even after considering Don's question, another thing that you can think about is, okay, I have this opportunity, a study setting, a data. How this study setting and data really suits for one particular thing. And there gotta be something, So I think you can use both questions and maximize what you have as a strength in the data will be also helpful.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and so if I may, I'm just adding something different from what has been said. And sometimes when you interact with reviewers, as Don was suggesting, for example, if you have a large that like qualitative evidence basis, and the reviewers are fascinated and intrigued by it, but they consider it like a rich, like kernel of data without really, they don't see what you see. For example, I had a piece on collective identity, the creation of collective identity, and then it became a piece on interorganizational collaboration. And by the third round of review, it's a piece on, I don't remember, void filling. So I remained open also because clearly I wanted the piece to be published, but also because I thought that those alternative lenses were bottom line reasonable, and so that's also another way where you are brought to tractability by way of reviews.
Wonderful. Jen, do you have a question?
No, I have something to offer perhaps as well.
Sure.
Because I'm more of a pracademic than academic, right? So I've worked on large industrial projects and so on, research related projects. And one of the things that we tend to often overlook is starting with a theory. Obviously, that's very important. The second thing is how much of what you're trying to do is within your scope of practice that you can actually access. So sometimes we design things or we think about the design of things that we would not be able to influence. So it doesn't stop us from dreaming big, but then we have to put some boundary boxes on, and that is how we slice and dice this thing into a doable starting point at least. So that's often something that I find when we start with research, we have a big scheme, and one of the slides mentioned that early on, that we might have big schemes, but how doable is it? Would it be possible for you to gather the information? Would you be able to speak to the people that you would like to speak to? Are you going to send out surveys, and will people actually even consider answering them? How would you make sure that these things get into the hands of the right people? So the data collection, the theories, all of those things, if you start to think them through and on a whiteboard, on a digital whiteboard, you suddenly start to see where the boundaries of the thing is. So yeah, that's the way I typically go about it.
Thank you. And then I know we had several of you mention these in your presentations as well, but what are some of the big common mistakes you see doctoral students make whenever they're starting a dissertation? What are some of your places where you might derail, and how can they overcome that?
I'll offer one quickly, just as a start, because it was the last speaker. Being too fixed in what it is that you hope to achieve. Not saying I will be agile through this process. So you could tie yourself into knots by not having an open mind at the start. So you might have really good ideas. You might have the what I call the shortfall rather than the gap that you're trying to address or deal with. But keep an open mind, because everybody here in their presentations said things will shift. And if you tie yourself down with, I'm definitely going to do this, good luck. It's never going to work out like that. I've never seen it before.
I would add something a little different to that. I see two things. First of all, I see students thinking they cannot make a contribution, that the field is so well developed and so on. But I would say that some of our most important contributions come from PhD theses. I could go on and on about how our literatures evolve and move because of the fresh minds that come in, whether they're leveraging experience that Jan's mentioned or the perspectives they bring. So the first thing I tell students is don't be shy. Be, as Samin said, bold. Bring your innovation, bring your new ideas. And along those lines, be very attuned to the so what. Why does this matter? So what? We can take a seminar and say, well, this paper didn't study that variable, therefore I'll do that paper. No, don't waste your time adding another variable. So what? And your so what can be original. It can be unique and different. So don't be afraid to be bold.
Are there more thoughts on this one, Valentina and Seven? You don't have to, of course, but just want to make sure you've got the space.
Thank you. No, I was like wondering whether, in addition to remaining flexible, sometimes also making sure that there is also, as Don was saying, you know, that if you're bold and persuaded about what you're doing, which I was not necessarily back then, but maybe also derailing into multiple projects that seem more low-hanging fruit for the anxiety, for example, to publishers. So this is not really a deep idea. It's more something that I've seen also supervising a few colleagues, you know, this idea that you need to have, by the time you hit the job market, already publications. So clearly, I mean, this could also work as a disincentive to remain ambitious and bold. And so it's important to, I think, also keep at bay a bit and remember the luxury. I don't want to be prescriptive. I did everything wrong back then, but this is just something that I learned.
That's a great point. And I think one of the next questions I want to address is a neat one because I think there could be some different perspectives on it. So this person asked, should we be including both qualitative and quantitative methods all in our dissertation? And I know in particular, we talked today about how, you know, one kind of tells you maybe the relationships between your constructs and the other gets at that how and why. Is it necessary to have both? Do you need both? Is it encouraged to have both? Is it okay to strictly do qualitative or strictly do quantitative? And what would be everyone's advice in that realm?
I have experience with this. So I think it depends, but I strongly believe that no matter what, right? It's not like I go into that I will be only doing qual, I will be only doing quant. And that can shift, and that depends on the research question. But more so, I really think that even if, let's say, you go in thinking that I'm 100% quant, you have to understand the setting. You have to understand what this means in this kind of field versus the other. So no matter what kind of study you do, I think there's gotta be some level of qualitative study in it, even if that means that is not the core of your research. There's always that. And even like, let's say you find something quantitatively, what that really means, if you want to really unpack and think about the meaning behind, and especially if you find something that is opposite of what you predicted, I think that's like really valuable to dig in deeper what that really means qual-wise. So I think it's just like you really have to do both, even if it ends up not being in the paper itself.
I would offer a slightly different view on this. There's a paper written in 1981 by Joseph McGrath called On Dilemmatics, and said there's no such thing as the perfect study. Starts off by saying your study's flawed and it's never going to be perfect. And it's a fascinating article. And basically what he says is theories and research can examine only 2 of 3 contributions at one time, or in terms of originality: generalizability, realism, and precision. And you can only do 2. You can't do all 3, only 2. And that's why we have to have different types of studies within a literature. So if you're doing experiments, you're great on precision, but you're probably not very good on generalizability. And if you're doing archival secondary studies, you're probably great on generalizability, but not good on precision. So I think as researchers, knowing the different types of designs that exist is crucial. Whether you decide to do them or not is up to you. But just having knowledge of the different insights that each one offers gives you greater understanding of the phenomenon. So Joseph McGrath, MGRATH, 1981, Dilemmatics, required reading.
Yeah, thank you. And on these, yeah, I didn't wanna. My point was absolutely not that you have to have them all or that is necessary. Perhaps in general, not necessarily through the dissertation, but more as you approach other projects, in addition to your dissertation. If it's a it's a solo methodology, your dissertation, I think that opening up serves two purposes. One is to signal the methodological versatility that I think it's a plus. Again, you can build your profile in many different ways, but certainly it is not trivial. And the second is that I think you learn to speak different epistemological and methodological languages as you go. So the possibility then to interact with colleagues, knowing what to ask and knowing what to propose and to offer, I think it's, for me, it was a nice legacy of practicing with different and experimenting with different methods.
Wonderful. Thank you all. For this next question, we're getting to the people side of these dissertations and large research projects. So could you share maybe some of your experiences or perhaps advice on how you can effectively manage these collaborations in the large projects, especially assuming there's division of labor, maybe communication challenges, making sure that everybody feels mutual respect among your co-investigators. But what are some of your best practices for the people management side of a large dissertation or research project?
I'll answer this as a team researcher. So you have to make a structure. I really believe in that. So what I mean by that is everyone is different and everybody's motivation might be different. Everybody's strength might be different. Everybody coming in maybe have different mental model. So it's really important to have that first setup really, really clearly. I think goes a long way. And again, things are changing, right? Even the authorship within the project may shift based on how people contribute and like what kind of life stage they are at. And, so it will change, but that first setup really gives you momentum. And after you kind of taste some success in the process, that will trigger like teams to bond and so on. So I think really that first step is critical. Like, don't assume. Yeah.
And for me, one rule of thumb, you might argue at some point, I think I did more, you did more. But to me, at the end of the day, was always, would I have done it alone? And if the answer was not, I wouldn't have been able to do it alone, although there might be little issues or divergences of views, I would still be happy and continue the project. So this is a question that I ask myself at the beginning of the project, and I keep asking myself as I move along. And it could be that each brings, again, a different expertise, the ability to speak to a different literature, to a different venue, to a different journal or a community, a different method, or simply that your colleague and or friend keeps you on pace, and so you don't get lost and you don't relay completely. So for all very different reasons, if you gain out of this collaboration, then it's worth it.
Yeah, it really comes down to process skills too and organizing. When Samin was going through those data sets she had toward the end of her slides, they're fascinating because those data allow you to examine so many different types of questions. But someone like myself, I don't have a lot of experience with those. And that's one reason why we collaborate, is to bring people on board who have specialized skills. So clearly meeting up front and expressing what our goals are, what our timeline is, and then working integratively is crucial. But this is a really great question because, so many projects now involve so many different types of people. But recognize that there is difficulty and challenge coming down the road. And a former mentor I had, unfortunately passed away earlier this year, named Michael Labatkin, used to say he would never have a friend as a co-author because almost all of his co-author relationships ruin friendships. So, I don't know about that, but it's something to, I don't know whether that's him or whether just be careful, be clear about expectations and be clear about timelines and be clear about working integratively and transparently.
Very good advice. This one is a little bit more dissertation focused, but something that I think could still apply to large projects. How do you balance your long-term goals with your time constraints in finishing a dissertation? So of course, like we've mentioned, we want it to be an impactful work, but sometimes you also have to finish. So where's the balance in figuring how to do that?
Setting goals for each one, time goals, time mileposts. This month I'm going to have this chapter done or this part of it done or that month. I know that, then it's I think maybe Valentina said the 2.5 factor. build in some buffer. But for me, having small milestones that were doable and then celebrate those really helped.
For me, my dissertation was monstrous, so I faced exactly that question. At the end of the day, I had to finish, right? So I finished with a version that is true to myself and true to the things that I can accomplish. But research doesn't finish after your graduation, right? So you have plenty of time after to expand and do more about it. So I don't think that's gonna be, bounded. So yes, you have to finish, and sometimes that dragon will end up having some smaller tail, but you can later, grow back.
All right, and then this one I think is just kind of a big picture question to round out our session. But what's the best way to manage a pipeline of projects so that you're having effective both quantity and quality output for your career?
This is something that we all have to do, that's for sure. Multiple projects. And I know people who have not made it through tenure because they didn't have a new project after their own. So I've managed multiple projects over the course of my career. It seems like as soon as you get the data done with one, you're thinking of another. And Javier, and so you probably add on to this and others, the project you're not doing always is a lot more fun than the one you are doing. And so it always looks a lot more alluring. So for me, I would have projects at different stages. One at conceptualization, one at under review, maybe one under revision, one under data collection. So it's an ongoing process that just never stops. And it really comes down to finding time. And I think that's your most important resource, is how you manage your time.
I think for me, it's people, right? So I think as long as you're really showing your work ethic and then surrounded by people like you, that really gives, your whole kind of almost village of researcher around you, and you learn from them. Sometimes you can rely on them, sometimes you lead and then they follow. That dynamics is so beautiful. And then at this time, I'm still assistant professor, but 6th year out, I think that's how I manage multiple projects, is now I have really good people that I built, and that's my people that I work with, and then that keeps me going.
And Valentina, I'm curious from your perspective too, just because the qualitative projects themselves can be so big each time you take on a project. Are you able to do multiple, or do you need to really focus on one at a time?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that you cannot juggle with more than a couple if it's both in the same stage. So when Don was saying, data collect, this makes sense. So if you manage to have this magic rhythm of data collection and then perhaps interpretation writing, this could work, but otherwise, for example, during my last sabbatical, I wanted to revamp really the empirical data collection, not just finish my project. So I started 4 projects in parallel, and I'm still stuck. So I'm like this pipeline that I'm hardly able to move on from because they were both too much. And at some point you will feel with large and sheer volumes of data, like for qualitative, you will feel a bit overwhelmed. You really need to embed yourself and go back and forth. And these are, I think, if you are in the same like stage of the research journey for multiple projects to be able to do it effectively. So I noticed that my productivity declined because I've done this mistake. So again, I'm able to share a worst practice, not a best practice.
Yeah. Fortunately, we can learn from all of those, right? None of us are perfect, but all of it's helpful for helping the next generation of scholars. So thank you all very much for sharing your thoughts. I'm going to turn things back over to Javier to finish up the session and let us know what's coming next. Oh, you're muted, Javier.
Thank you. Thank you. You should be seeing my screen. Briefly, you've received that information previously, so I won't belabor it. But our next session and the session after that will be a chance for you to meet with a subset of our awesome methods experts and panelists who we've chosen this year in particular to allow people, regardless of whether they are on the macro side, but also on the qualitative side, to sort of mini track themselves to a certain extent. So people, we talked about the Joya method. Obviously, Kevin Cole is an authority on this topic, and I won't go down the list of our speakers, but we're blessed with people who are very much at the forefront of not only writing with these methods, but developing them and explaining them to newcomers to the field. So we've got a great lineup of speakers. Each will be hosting roundtables where you can ask your questions in person for this next session. And how do you prepare for that will come up next. But I will simply mention that in this last half hour of our next session, next Wednesday, we will also be breaking you up more or less randomly so that you get to interact with some of the fellow participants. And I've just shown here, in addition, just 5 of the division volunteers we have here are current and 2 past division chairs, very senior scholars of great accomplishments, and also 3 of the current officers of the divisions. So you'll get to interact with some of the people who basically lead the division, have led the division, and this is our opportunity as well for you to ask questions of people way beyond what Cindy or I could offer in this respect. How do you prepare for this? Well, before the end of this week, you will receive another message from us, most likely from Cindy, that amongst other things, this message will include 2 links. One that will indicate to which tables you've been assigned. As you can imagine, given the number of participants, we had over 130 people at some point in the room. It's not necessarily going to be able for you to attend the both of the top choices that you made, but we've done a very thorough effort to make sure that you are assigned to tables that meet your needs and that you will find interesting. And I guarantee you that even if you didn't know the speaker, you'll come out impressed and informed at the end of the session. So make sure that you pick up the link that will tell you which tables to attend, and in particular, in what order to attend your first versus second round table of the session. The other thing that we will provide is a link to a spreadsheet that includes brief descriptions written by our panelists, where they tell you in brief what their method is about, what it can do for you, and in addition, list 3 resources or sometimes a few more. This could be links to existing webinars or online sources. Most of them will be articles or chapters that you can read ahead of time or use to follow up with a reading ahead of time. To prepare for the breakout rooms and the meet and greet after that doesn't require any particular preparation, but please be sure that you come prepared for our next session, knowing which roundtables you'll be attending so that you can join the roundtables as quickly as possible and make the best of the next wonderful set of panelists that I think we have set up on behalf of the division. I want to end here briefly by thanking our volunteers, our panelists today, the people who've been doing all the work in the background to enable this session and the rest of the consortium. And we look forward to seeing you same time, same starting time in exactly a week's time. Cindy, any last words? Other than that, we will let you be.
I was just going to say thank you to everyone. A great session, and thank you to our participants, and we'll see you next week.